Razor's gang ruled the back alleys of Phoenix Street Market like they owned the whole world. Anyone who passed through their territory learned quickly that a quiet walk could turn into a nightmare. And on that dusty, dimly lit evening, the nightmare chose the wrong man. Steven Seagal walked calmly through the alley, carrying a simple paper bag of groceries. No bodyguards, no noise, no fear, just steady steps and a peaceful face. He looked like an ordinary older man minding his business, heading home. Razor didn't like that. "Hey," he barked, stepping forward with a grin that was all ego and no brain. His men laughed behind him, leaning on motorcycles, cracking their knuckles like they practiced intimidation for fun. Steven stopped, not because he was scared, but because he had manners. Razor walked up close, too close, blocking the path with his chest puffed out. "You lost, Grandpa?" Razor smirked. "This street belongs to us. You want to cross? Pay the toll." Steven's eyes were calm, steady. "I'm just passing through," he said softly. "I don't want any trouble." The gang burst out laughing. "Oh, he doesn't want trouble," one of them mocked. But Razor wasn't laughing. Razor hated calm people, hated people who didn't fear him. It made him feel small, and nothing was worse for a man who survived only by pretending to be big. He slapped the grocery bag from Steven's hand. Tomatoes rolled across the ground, one bursting against the wall. Steven didn't react. He didn't curse. He didn't threaten. He didn't even frown. He just looked down, then slowly looked up. And that calmness? That quiet? It irritated Razor more than any insult. "You think ignoring me makes you tough?" Razor growled. He grabbed Steven by the collar. The alley fell silent. A few people at the end of the street stopped to watch. Someone took out a phone. Another whispered, "Bro, leave that old guy alone." But Razor didn't care. He ripped Steven Seagal's shirt clean open, tearing it from the collar down the middle in one brutal pull. The sound echoed through the alley like a challenge. Razor smirked. His men laughed. Everyone watching held their breath. "Look at you now," Razor sneered. "Just a weak old man pretending to be strong." But Razor had no idea what he had just exposed. And in the next few seconds, he was going to regret that move more than anything he'd ever done in his life. The alley behind Phoenix Street Market had a reputation older than most of the shops surrounding it. Anyone who lived nearby knew its rules. Don't walk alone, don't walk late, and definitely don't walk through if Razor and his crew were hanging around. Their bikes, parked like trophies, marked the territory long before their voices were heard. Earlier that day, before Steven even arrived, Razor stood at the mouth of the alley, barking orders like a king of concrete. "Spread out," he told his men, flicking his toothpick from one side of his mouth to the other. "Anyone passing through pays, no exceptions. I'm not losing a single rupee today." His gang nodded. Wolf, a big guy with more muscle than sense, Spider, thin and twitchy, and Diesel, the silent one who did whatever Razor said without blinking. They weren't smart, but Razor didn't need smart. He needed loyalty, or at least fear. He had plenty of both. Razor wasn't always a gang leader. Once, he had been a regular street kid with nothing in his pockets but anger. But anger can grow into ego, and ego can grow into power when no one stops it. And in this alley, Razor had never been stopped, not once. So when he saw Steven walking in from the far end, calm, steady, and completely unmoved by the chaos around him, Razor felt something he didn't like. Disrespected. Steven Seagal didn't fit the image Razor expected of people who passed through his turf. Most people hurried, their eyes down, anxious not to get noticed. Steven, on the other hand, walked like he belonged anywhere he chose to be. No hesitation, no fear, no rushed steps. Just a man carrying groceries on a quiet evening. Razor noticed the details: no jewelry, no expensive clothes, nothing to show wealth or weakness. Just a man. Yet something about him felt out of place, like he wasn't walking through the alley. He was simply walking, and the alley happened to exist around him. That bothered Razor more than he cared to admit. "Who's that old guy?" Spider muttered. "Doesn't matter," Razor said. "He's using my street, and he'll learn the rules." But Steven didn't even spare the gang a glance. He shifted the grocery bag in his hand and continued forward with the same peaceful expression. This made Razor's jaw tighten. Respect was something he demanded, not earned. And this stranger wasn't offering any. Wolf moved first, blocking Steven's path with a half smile and a full-sized ego. "Where you going, Uncle?" Wolf taunted. "Got somewhere important to be?" Steven nodded politely. Home. The simplicity irritated Wolf. He expected fear, or stammering, or even a bribe, but Steven offered none of these. Razor finally stepped in, pushing Wolf aside like he wanted this moment for himself. Home, Razor repeated. Nah, you're not going anywhere until you pay the toll. Steven paused. Not because he was intimidated, but because he truly respected human interaction, even when that interaction was rotten. He looked Razor in the eyes calmly. I respect your rules, he said, but I don't want any trouble. Let me pass. Spider laughed. He talks like a school teacher. Diesel crossed his arms. He's scared. But Razor knew better. This wasn't fear. This was control. This was confidence wrapped in silence. And that made Razor's insecurities flare. Men like him survive by convincing themselves they're the strongest. A quiet stranger shaking that belief was unacceptable. Razor leaned in. No one passes without paying. That includes you, Uncle. Steven lowered his gaze just enough to avoid escalating things. I'm just here to go home, that's all. Razor grinned, enjoying the audience forming behind them. People from the market slowed down, whispering. That's all? Razor said mockingly. That's all? He slapped the grocery bag out of Steven's grip. Tomatoes and onions rolled across the dirt in every direction. One egg cracked on Razor's shoe. He stared at it for a second before kicking the remaining items away like a child breaking toys. But Steven didn't react. He simply watched the groceries scatter, as though the items were not worth more than the peace he valued. Razor expected fear. He expected anger. He expected anything. But Steven's quietness? That was worse than an insult. The gang members exchanged glances. Something felt different about this guy. Wolf whispered, Boss, maybe let him pass. Razor shot him a glare that shut him up immediately. No, Razor said. This old man thinks he can walk away from me. Let's show him who runs this street. He grabbed Steven's shirt with both hands and yanked. The collar ripped first, then the chest. The fabric tearing down the middle with a sharp, violent sound that echoed in the tight alley. Gasps erupted around them. Spider blinked. Wolf swallowed hard. Even Razor paused for a split second, surprised at his own aggression. Steven stood still, not stepping back, not raising his hands, not even blinking. His shirt hung open, torn completely, exposing something none of them expected. Razor smirked, mistaking silence for weakness. There we go, he said. Now you look like what you really are. But Razor didn't realize what he had revealed. Not yet. And in that alley under the flickering light, in front of dozens of witnesses, Razor's mistake had already begun to unfold. Which city and country are you watching from? Tell me in the comments. For a moment after Razor ripped Steven's shirt, the entire alley felt frozen. The torn fabric fluttered slightly in the evening breeze, hanging in two halves over Steven's sides. The rip had exposed his upper chest and shoulder skin marked with old scars, each one carved by a story Razor wasn't ready to know. But Razor didn't notice any of that. He only saw what he wanted to see. A victim. A quiet man. Someone he could break easily. He puffed out his chest and stepped even closer. What's wrong? Razor sneered. Cat got your tongue? Or you just scared to talk after getting exposed? Steven didn't respond. His silence wasn't fearful, it was deliberate, controlled, and unnervingly calm. It was the kind of silence that didn't just hold back anger. It suggested he had no reason to be angry in the first place. That's what unnerved Razor. People around them whispered, their voices carrying through the tight alley. Why is he so calm? He didn't even react when his shirt got ripped. Something's off about him. Spider leaned toward Wolf. Man, I don't like this. Why isn't he saying anything? Wolf rubbed his neck. Boss should just leave him alone. But Razor wasn't listening. Razor never listened. He needed to feel powerful. He needed to show control. And most of all, he needed an audience. This is what happens, Razor announced loudly, spreading his arms. When someone disrespects me in my own street. A few people recorded on their phones. A couple of shopkeepers stood at a distance, watching with tight, uneasy expressions. Steven finally moved. A small, slow movement. He bent down not toward Razor, not toward retaliation, just to pick up a crushed tomato lying near his foot. He brushed off a speck of dirt and placed it carefully back into the torn grocery bag. The alley grew even quieter. You're really picking up vegetables right now? Razor said, his voice faltering with disbelief. Steven spoke softly, but his tone had weight. You shouldn't have done that. Spider's head snapped up. Wolf felt a chill run down his spine. Even Diesel, who rarely showed emotion, shifted with unease. Razor tried to laugh, but it came out thin. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. And what exactly are you gonna do, huh? Tell me. Steven stood up fully. Under the torn shirt, his posture remained perfect, straight, balanced, grounded like someone who had trained his body longer than Razor had been alive. But more than his posture, something else caught Spider's eye first. Boss, Spider whispered, pointing at Steven's shoulder. Look. There, on Steven's exposed skin, inked in deep, dark lines, was a symbol. Not a decorative tattoo. Not a gang marking. Not a random design. It was an elite military insignia one Spider recognized instantly from the documentaries he watched late at night. A mark worn only by the most advanced combat instructors in the world. A unit regular soldiers whispered about. A unit civilians barely knew existed. Boss. Spider swallowed hard. That symbol. That's not normal. That's from a special operations group. Razor scoffed. You believe everything you see online? It's probably fake. But his voice trembled. Just slightly. Only someone listening closely would notice, but Steven noticed everything. Steven met Razor's eyes. Calm. Neutral. Not angry. Not frightened. Just observing. And that terrified Razor more than any threat. You think a little drawing scares me? Razor barked, trying to reclaim control. You think you're some sort of warrior? Steven's answer was simple. No, I'm not trying to scare you. The simplicity of the sentence sent a ripple of discomfort through the gang. Because only a man who didn't need to prove anything talked like that. But Razor, trapped in his own ego, couldn't stop. He shoved Steven again, harder this time. Steven didn't budge. Not an inch. It was like pushing a wall disguised as a man. See that? Razor shouted to the crowd. He's frozen. He's scared stiff. A few people shook their heads. They could see the truth. Razor was performing. Steven was simply allowing him to. A small boy watching from behind a fruit cart tugged his father's shirt. Papa, why isn't the uncle fighting back? The father lowered his voice. Because people like him don't fight unless they have to. But Razor heard the whispers. He felt the shift. The crowd wasn't fully with him anymore. So he needed to escalate. He grabbed Steven's shoulder right where the tattoo was and squeezed hard. And that was Razor's final mistake. Steven's eyes slowly lifted, meeting Razor's with a gaze so controlled, so utterly unshaken, that Razor felt something new. Fear. Real fear. The kind he hadn't felt since childhood. Let go, Steven said quietly. Razor froze for half a second. His hand loosened involuntarily. But ego is a stubborn poison. So instead of letting go, Razor tightened his grip and spat. Make me. In the crowd, someone gasped. Wolf muttered, Boss, don't. Spider stepped back slowly. Diesel clenched his fists, unsure whether to help or run. Steven didn't raise a fist. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't prepare a stance. He simply said, You're about to regret that. And Razor realized something. This wasn't a threat. It was a statement. A quiet, factual warning from a man who knew exactly what he was capable of. And what Razor was not. The moment Steven said, You're about to regret that, the entire alley seemed to inhale and freeze. Even the flickering streetlight above them paused in its stutter, as if the world were waiting to see Razor's next move. Razor tried to laugh it off, tried to pretend he wasn't shaken. But the laugh never fully formed, only a choked breath that came out awkward and weak. Steven didn't step forward. He didn't posture. He didn't raise his hands. He simply looked at Razor with a calmness that felt older than the alley itself. A calmness born not from arrogance, but from experience Razor couldn't even imagine. Wolf was the first to step back. Boss, he whispered, swallowing hard. Something's wrong. Spider nodded quickly, his voice trembling. Yeah, man, I told you. That tattoo, why does he have that? And why's he not scared? No normal old guy stays calm like this. Diesel wasn't saying anything, but his eyes stayed locked on Steven as if studying an animal he suddenly realized he couldn't control. Razor turned on them, furious. What's wrong with all of you? He snapped. He's just some old martial arts wannabe. Look at him. No muscle, no weapons, no. But he stopped mid-sentence. Because Steven had moved. Not toward Razor. Not toward the gang. Just toward the ground. He bent down again, picked up a bent onion, and wiped it gently against his torn shirt as if it mattered more than any of them. That was what made Razor's heart thump hard against his chest. A man who valued a ruined onion over a threat? That man had nothing to fear, and the crowd saw it too. Market vendors stood at the alley's edge, whispering urgently. That man isn't ordinary. He didn't even flinch. Look at Razor, he's actually scared. Kids watched from behind boxes and poles, eyes wide, sensing something big. The energy of the place shifted. Power had changed sides, and Razor felt it slipping through his fingers like sand. He stepped back just half an inch, but Steven saw it. Everyone saw it. Spider muttered. He made Boss step back. Wolf whispered, "Bro, we should bounce. I'm serious." Razor's face twisted with embarrassment. Retreating even a little in front of his gang was humiliating. He needed to reclaim dominance, fast. So he did the one thing he knew how to do. He doubled down on stupidity. Razor raised his voice, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Hey, old man," he shouted, trying to sound confident. "I said make me let go, or are you just all talk?" But Steven didn't answer with words. He answered with silence, a silence that grew heavier by the second. Razor felt it pressing against him, the weight of a man who didn't have to talk because he knew exactly what he could do. Steven slowly rotated his shoulder, the shoulder Razor was gripping. The movement was small, subtle, but Razor felt his fingers shift without meaning to. He tightened his grip automatically, but that only made Steven's next words colder. "I gave you a chance," Steven said softly, almost sadly. "Walk away." It wasn't a threat. It was mercy, and for some reason, that scared Razor more than any threat could have. The gang watched, breath held. Diesel whispered, "Boss, just leave him, man." But Razor couldn't. His pride was an anchor tied around his neck. He shoved Steven again harder, desperate now. Steven didn't move, not even a fraction of an inch. He was rooted like a pillar, unshakable, unmovable. And that small realization made Razor feel more fragile than he ever had. The crowd reacted instantly. "Did you see that? He didn't budge at all. What is he made of?" Kids gasped. Wolf took another step backward. Spider's hands began trembling. Even Razor's own mindset began to crack. He forced a laugh. "See? He's frozen. He doesn't know what to do, he's scared." But the crowd was no longer buying his performance. They'd seen the reality. Steven wasn't frozen. He was simply choosing not to move. Spider shook his head. "Boss, this guy isn't scared. He's letting you do this." Razor snapped, "Shut up." But Steven's expression never changed. Then, a sound broke the moment. Engines. Loud ones. A deep hum echoed through the alley as a long, black SUV turned slowly around the corner, headlights sweeping across the walls. It moved differently from Razor's gang bikes. Silent, precise, heavy like it was driven by people used to responding, not bragging. The SUV rolled to a stop at the entrance of the alley. Every voice went quiet. Razor's grip loosened without him meaning to. The back door of the SUV opened, and when the first man stepped out, the crowd gasped. Black tactical uniform, shoulder insignias, a radio piece clipped to the vest, boots that weren't worn by anyone except trained professionals. He scanned the alley in one smooth motion, instantly assessing every person present. Then his eyes landed on Steven. "Sir," the man said, voice respectful, strong. "We arrived as fast as we could." Another man exited, then a third, then a fourth. The gang froze. Razor's mouth fell open. Spider whispered, terrified, "Why are they calling him sir?" Wolf muttered, "Bro, what the hell is happening?" Diesel took a step back, for the first time in his life looking genuinely afraid. The tactical officer approached Steven with discipline Razor could never dream of. "Master Seagal," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "are you hurt?" Razor's heart stopped cold. The room had gone completely silent after Steven Seagal slammed the gang leader to the ground. No one blinked. No one swallowed. Every pair of eyes watched the man groaning on the floor, clutching his shoulder like it no longer belonged to his body. But Steven wasn't done. Not even close. The gang leader, still red-faced from pain and embarrassment, tried to roll onto his knees, but Steven put a calm foot on his back, holding him down without effort. "Stay," Steven said quietly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't a shout, but it froze the entire room like a command from nature itself. The gang members looked at each other, unsure whether to help their boss or protect themselves. Some instinctively took half a step back. Others stood glued to the spot, their confidence evaporating. Steven removed his foot and stepped back, allowing the broken ego leader to get up. The man staggered to his feet, breathing heavily, face twisted between anger and humiliation. He couldn't meet Steven's eyes. "Pick up your shirt," Steven said. The torn fabric was still lying where the gang member had ripped it in arrogance earlier. The boss stared at the shirt, then at Steven, and something inside him cracked. For the first time, he understood he wasn't the predator here. He was prey. Steven lifted the shirt himself and casually draped it over a chair. "You ripped something that didn't belong to you," he said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable warning. "And you did it because you thought I wouldn't respond." The gang leader's mouth trembled. I didn't know." "You didn't think," Steven interrupted. The silence that followed was heavier than the punches had been. Steven stepped closer, not aggressively, but with a controlled presence so powerful that even the air felt pressured. The leader swallowed hard and looked down. "Let me teach you something," Steven said. "Respect doesn't come from fear. Fear only lasts until someone stronger walks in the room." Steven let that sink in. It sank deep. "You want your men to follow you?" Steven continued. "Then learn to control yourself, learn discipline, and most importantly, learn to fight without ego." The gang members exchanged looks, astonished, impressed, confused. They had never heard anyone talk to their boss like this, and they had never seen him listen. But right now, the gang leader wasn't a boss. He was a student getting a lesson he badly needed. Steven stepped back and lifted his hands slightly in a teaching stance. "You attacked me because you wanted to show power," Steven said. "But real power is control. So here's your chance." The boss hesitated. What do you want me to do?" "Try to hit me again," Steven replied. Everyone gasped. Even the gang leader's eyes widened. But Steven didn't say it as a challenge. He said it like a teacher testing a student. The man stepped forward, cautiously this time. He threw a punch, not wild and angry, but careful, measured. Steven slipped the punch effortlessly and tapped the man's shoulder with 2 fingers. Tap. The gang leader spun not from force, but from shock at how easily Steven redirected him. "Again," Steven said. The boss tried again. A jab, a hook, a desperate grab. Steven avoided every move with the softness of water, the precision of a blade. And each time, instead of slamming the man, he simply tapped him on the wrist, the elbow, the sternum, the hip. Every tap sent the man stumbling, completely unable to control his own momentum. It looked like magic, but it was mastery. The gang members' mouths fell open as they watched their boss get dismantled without Steven even using force. Finally, Steven stepped closer and placed a single hand on the gang leader's chest. Not a strike, just a hand. The leader froze. "This," Steven said quietly, "is real control." Then Steven pressed lightly and the man collapsed backward onto a couch. Breath knocked out of him, from nothing but technique. Steven turned toward the gang members. "If any of you want to learn discipline instead of chaos, you know where to find me." The men nodded, almost respectfully, almost like soldiers receiving orders. Steven walked toward the door, but before leaving, he paused and looked back at their humiliated boss. "Next time you try to rip someone's shirt," he said with a small smirk, "make sure you understand the man wearing it." The door closed behind him. Inside, the gang leader sat still, staring at the floor. He wasn't angry. He wasn't embarrassed. He was changed. For the first time, he'd met someone he couldn't bully. Someone who didn't need to shout to command fear. Someone who destroyed his ego but not his body. And deep down, he knew Steven Seagal had just saved him from a lifetime of mistakes. The next morning, rumors had already spread across the entire neighborhood. Steven Seagal destroyed the gang leader without even hitting him. Bos ko ek tap per uradia. Uski shirt farna sab se barigaltiti. Every shopkeeper, every mechanic, every street vendor had heard the story in their own version. Some exaggerated, some softened, but all agreed on one thing. The gang leader had been humbled. But Steven wasn't thinking about any of that. He was at the old community dojo, sweeping the wooden floor with slow, methodical strokes. The sunlight filtering through the windows made dust particles dance in the air. The place was peaceful, untouched by the noise outside. Steven had always believed that a dojo wasn't just a training place. It was a reflection of the person who maintained it. If it was clean, calm, and ordered, then the people who entered it would aspire to the same discipline. As he worked, he sensed someone approaching long before he heard footsteps. He didn't look up when the door opened. He didn't need to. The gang leader stood at the entrance, wearing a plain shirt, looking nothing like the arrogant man from the previous night. His swollen pride had shrunk, and even his posture was different, less rigid, more uncertain. Steven continued sweeping. The gang leader cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" Steven finished one long stroke with the broom before finally raising his head. "Talking is easy. Fixing yourself? Much harder." The gang leader exhaled slowly, as if preparing himself to admit something he had never admitted to anyone before. "I came to say, I was wrong." Steven leaned the broom against the wall. "I know." The man blinked, confused. "You knew?" "I saw it the moment you tore my shirt," Steven replied. "A man who's in control doesn't need to show power. Only a man who's losing control does that." The leader lowered his eyes, ashamed. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," he muttered. "I just wanted to look strong in front of my men." Steven walked closer, his expression patient but firm. "That's the problem. You want to look strong instead of being strong." The man nodded slowly, absorbing the words like medicine, bitter, but necessary. "My whole life," the gang leader said, "I've only known force. Power meant making people fear me. If they didn't fear me, they wouldn't respect me. Yesterday, you embarrassed me." Steven shook his head. "No, you embarrassed yourself. I just showed you the truth." The man looked up, surprised at the gentleness in Steven's tone. Suddenly, the gang leader dropped to his knees. Not dramatically, quietly, like a man lowering himself to carry a burden he couldn't carry anymore. "Teach me," he whispered. "Please." Steven watched him silently. People begged Steven for autographs, pictures, attention, but rarely did anyone ask him for discipline. "Stand up," Steven said. The gang leader rose, confused. "I'm not interested in followers," Steven continued. "I teach those who want to learn, not those who want to look tough." "I want to learn," the leader said firmly. "Not for them, for myself." Steven studied him carefully. For the first time, the man wasn't acting. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't showing off. He was simply a student. "Very well," Steven said, "but understand this martial arts is not about fighting. It's about not needing to fight." The leader nodded. Steven gestured toward the center of the dojo. "Take your stance." The man obeyed, raising his hands clumsily. His posture was stiff, his feet too close, his shoulders too tense. "Relax," Steven instructed. The leader tried, but tension radiated from him. Years of stress, aggression, and ego made his body rigid. Steven walked behind him and gently placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "Control starts here," he said, tapping the shoulder lightly. "If you're tense, you've already lost." The man exhaled, lowering his shoulders. "Better," Steven said. "Now attack me." The leader hesitated. "Again, again, and again, and again," Steven said. "Until you understand the difference between force and skill." The man threw a punch. Steven moved like a shadow. A pivot, a slide, a gentle touch to the wrist. The man stumbled forward. "Feel your own weight," Steven said. "Use it. Don't fight it." Another punch. Another effortless redirection. "Stop trying to hit me," Steven said. "Try to understand me." The leader paused, breathing heavily, but this time, his frustration wasn't anger. It was discovery. "Why can't I touch you?" he asked. Steven smiled faintly. "Because you think too much about yourself, your strength, your image. Stop thinking about you. Think about the movement." The lesson continued for an hour, then 2, then 3. At the end, the gang leader was exhausted, but something had changed in his eyes. A calmness, a clarity, a humility he had never shown before. As he gathered his breath, Steven offered a simple, sincere nod. "You're learning." The gang leader bowed respectfully, deeply. And for the first time in his life, he bowed because he wanted to, not because he had to. The next week brought a change to Phoenix Street Market that no one expected. The gang leader, once known for terrorizing shopkeepers, smashing stalls, and bullying anyone who dared to breathe wrong, was now seen sweeping the very alley where he used to cause chaos. The same alley where he ripped Steven's shirt. The same alley where his pride had shattered. People stared from a distance, whispering, "Is he helping clean? Ye wohi bandahai? Razor? Impossible." He never lifted a finger for anything good. But it wasn't impossible. It was transformation. Every morning, before sunrise, he went to Steven's dojo. Not for fighting, not for toughness, not for dominance, but for discipline. Steven guided him with quiet patience. He corrected his stance, not by yelling, but by guiding. He taught him breathing, balance, focus lessons Razor had never learned from the streets. With every passing day, the man who once feared losing control slowly learned that true strength lay in having control. One afternoon, while wiping down the dojo floor, Razor paused and looked at Steven. "Can I ask you something?" Steven nodded, continuing to adjust a training mat. "Why didn't you destroy me that night?" Razor asked softly. "You could have broken bones. You could have humiliated me. But you didn't." "Why?" Steven paused, then sat down across from him. "When I looked at you," Steven said gently, "I didn't see a threat. I saw a scared young man pretending to be powerful." Razor's breath caught. No one had ever spoken to him like that, without insult, without hatred, without fear. "I saw someone desperate to be respected," Steven continued. "But you didn't know the difference between fear and respect. Many don't." Razor swallowed, eyes glistening. "In my world, fear is the only way," he murmured. "Maybe," Steven replied, "but fear doesn't last, respect does." Razor lowered his head, the weight of years settling on him. Steven placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're here now. You're learning. That alone is strength." At that moment, someone knocked on the door. It was the old shopkeeper, the same man whose stall Razor had smashed months ago just to prove a point. The shopkeeper hesitated at the doorway. Razor stood quickly, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I came," the old man said, voice trembling, "to thank you." Razor blinked. "Thank me? For what?" "For returning my tools. For fixing the shelves you broke. For replacing the umbrella stand you ruined." Razor's jaw tightened. "It was the least I could do." "No," the shopkeeper said. "It was the right thing to do." The old man bowed slightly, something no one had ever done to Razor. When he left, Razor sat back down, overwhelmed. "You see," Steven said softly, "that's respect returning to you, not because you demanded it, because you earned it." Razor nodded, fighting tears he never allowed himself to show. The following days brought even more change. The market vendors began greeting him. Kids stopped running away when he walked by. Shopkeepers who once hid behind their counters now offered him water on hot days. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was slow, quiet, real. And that's how true change happens. By the end of the week, Razor returned to the alley at sunset, the same place where everything began. Steven was already there, standing with calm hands folded behind him. Razor approached, stood straight, and bowed deeply. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't just teach me martial arts. You taught me how to be a man." Steven smiled faintly. "You did that yourself. I just pointed the way." Razor exhaled, feeling lighter than he had in years. "I want to help others," he said. "Kids in the area, boys who are going down the wrong path like I did. Can I bring them to your dojo?" Steven nodded. "That's exactly what this world needs. One person who decides to break a cycle." Razor's eyes lit up with purpose. For the first time in his life, he wasn't feared. He wasn't hated. He wasn't empty. He was useful. He was respected. He was human. Respect isn't about power. Strength isn't about hurting others. And humility? It can turn the most dangerous enemy into the most loyal friend. People don't get better by force. They grow when someone shows them a different path. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is one moment of choosing respect over revenge.